In 1990, British novelist JK Rowling was sitting on a train when she was struck by the idea of a boy who went to a school for wizards, a story she would develop and write over the next 5 years. Little did Rowling know that her idea would turn into a series that would sell more copies than any book series in history, with over 600 million copies sold according to Scholastic. The first Harry Potter, known as either the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you read it, begins its story from the perspective of Vernon Dursley, a drill manufacturer with a comic resentment of the unexpected and out of place. Vernon begins to have a very bad day when he overhears some wizards mentioning his magical in-laws, the Potters. But things go from bad to worse for Vernon when the Potter's son Harry is unexpectedly dropped on his doorstep that evening, with a letter from someone called Albus Dumbledore telling him that the Potters are dead, and he and his wife Petunia have to take care of Harry now. Petunia and Vernon begrudgingly raise Harry alongside their spoiled son Dudley, and they do their best to pretend he doesn't have magical powers. This works well enough until Harry gets his admissions letter from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the premier school of magic in Britain. Vernon tries to avoid the letters by boarding up the front door, moving the family to a hotel, and finally to an obscure shack, which doesn't really help because the letters keep finding them by magic. Finally, a wizard shows up personally to make sure Harry gets his admissions letter, Rubeus Hagrid, the half-giant Hogwarts groundskeeper. Hagrid assumes that Harry has a baseline knowledge of wizardy things, but is furious to discover that the Dursleys have intentionally kept all this knowledge from Harry, so Hagrid has to give Harry the Cliff Notes version of what's happening in the book. Harry's parents kicked the bucket defending Harry from Voldemort, our series' big bad. Voldemort and his allies are wizard supremacists who don't like muggles who are the non-magical. But Harry inadvertently defeated their leader as a baby when Voldemort's killing curse ricocheted back on him, which turned Harry into a baby superstar with a famous scar. As a result, when Hagrid takes Harry to get his school equipment at Diagon Alley, Harry finds that everyone knows his name and backstory. In preparation for wizard school, Harry gets his very own wand, which wizards use to focus their innate abilities. Ollivander the Wand Maker reveals that Harry's wand was made alongside another wand, which Ollivander once gave to Voldemort, which is foreshadowing for stuff that will happen later. Hagrid also gifts Harry an owl called Hedwig, which wizards use to send mail back and forth, since complex technology breaks when exposed to magic. With his school gear acquired, Harry is ready to go to Hogwarts once the term starts in the fall. Now so far, nothing particularly revolutionary has happened in this story. After all, the idea of a young boy who goes to a school for wizards predates Harry Potter, such as in Ursula Le Guin's 1968 book A Wizard of Earthsea. But what really sets Harry Potter apart is its presentation and world building. The modern era has never had a fictional subculture that was so well realized, and which so totally filled the imagination. Another thing that really helped this series become so engrossing to young readers, as Austin McConnell has noted, is that every Harry Potter is a modern mystery novel, dropping clues and throwing up red herrings before revealing the answer to every book's big twist villains or dangling plot threads. We get this not only with stuff like the aforementioned mystery surrounding Harry's wand, but also with Hagrid making a withdrawal of a mysterious package from Gringotts Wizard Bank while taking care of Harry. When the start of term rolls around, Harry arrives at platform 9 3/4, a magically hidden train entrance which will take Harry to Hogwarts. At the train station, Harry meets the Weasley family and befriends middle child Ron, who further helps fill Harry in on the magical world, because the Weasley family are all wizards. Harry also makes his first enemy in the person of Draco Malfoy, an imperious and self-important young wizard who belittles the Weasleys for their large family and lack of social standing or money. Also introduced are Neville Longbottom, the perpetually clumsy and forgetful, and the bookish Hermione Granger. Once the train reaches Hogwarts, Harry and the other students are sorted into one of 4 school houses: Gryffindor for the brave, Slytherin for the ambitious, Ravenclaw for the studious, and Hufflepuff for the losers, the hardworking. One of the things that becomes apparent in this book series right away, and especially during the sorting ceremony, is that this book series has a very large ensemble cast of characters. There are the ones everyone knows, like Ron's troublemaking brothers Fred and George or Quidditch captain Oliver Wood, but there's also total randos like Susan Bones, Lavender Brown, Justin Finch Fletchley, all of whom will pop up again and again in these books and really help make the story feel like it's happening in a particular place with particular people who aren't immediately connected to our protagonist or his friends. The children are sorted via an enchanted hat which telepathically communicates with students. When Harry is ready to be sorted, he and the hat bicker over his placement for a minute. Harry has heard that most power-hungry and villainous wizards go to Slytherin, and he doesn't want to end up there, but the hat tells him that he has a lot of Slytherin-y potential. Harry tells the hat that he really wants to be in Gryffindor, and the hat goes along with it. Once the sorting is over, Harry joins Ron, who is also sorted to Gryffindor, and shortly a magical feast begins. In addition to the students, also in attendance are the professors and staff, such as Minerva McGonagall, the strict Transfiguration teacher, Professor Quirrell, the timid Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Severus Snape, the potions master, who preemptively hates Harry because Harry's dad, James, bullied Snape in high school, and of course Albus Dumbledore, the marginally insane but very wise headmaster of Hogwarts, considered to be the greatest wizard in the world, and who famously defeated the wizard world's last big bad, Gellert Grindelwald. Now that you successfully have more names than you can remember, the real story can begin. With Harry finally settled at school, he adjusts to the world of magical education, with classes to teach him to cast spells, brew potions, and how to ride a broom. Harry is surprised to find that he is good at riding brooms, just like his dad, and Harry is quickly added to the Quidditch team, which is like wizard polo. But Harry and Ron are up to more than just their classes, as they start to unravel the secret of the package that Hagrid retrieved from Gringotts, which is being guarded at Hogwarts. After a misadventure with a troll in which the duo save Hermione, the pair become a trio as they collectively pool their investigative efforts. Over Christmas, Harry receives a gift from Dumbledore in the form of an invisibility cloak that once belonged to Harry's dad, and Harry uses it to get up to mischief during the rest of the series. Later, on an errand for Hagrid to help him smuggle a dragon off school property, Harry and Ron are caught and sent to detention in the Forbidden Forest. In the Forbidden Forest, Harry stumbles onto a half-dead version of Voldemort, drinking unicorn blood to keep himself alive, but he escapes unscathed. Putting the pieces together after learning that the mysterious package from earlier is the Philosopher's Stone, which can make an elixir of immortality, Harry and the gang realize that Voldemort is trying to restore himself to full health by getting his hands on the stone hidden in the school. And worse still, Dumbledore is out of town. Suspecting that the vile Professor Snape is Voldemort's accomplice, the kids decide to keep him from stealing the stone by stealing it themselves, National Treasure style. Together, they outsmart a series of puzzles devised by the teachers to guard the stones, and they each get to show their strengths at intuition, strategy, and practical skills as wizards. As YouTuber Quinn Curio has noted, these trials, and the books in general, highlight Ron a lot more positively than do the movies, in which Ron is basically treated as a cowardly moron. A lot of this has to do with the fact that Ron's smartest lines are given to Hermione in the movies, because screenwriter Steve Kloves, by his own admission, really liked Hermione the best of Harry's two friends. Harry makes it to the final chamber alone, but instead of Snape, Harry finds Professor Quirrell, who is hosting Voldemort's spirit or whatever on the back of his head, because sure, that might as well happen. Harry is forced to retrieve the stone, but when Quirrell decides to grab it, he melts like the Wicked Witch of the West, and Harry is saved via Deus Ex Machina. Harry awakens in the hospital wing with Dumbledore ready to give Harry an exposition dump, which seems to happen at the end of every Potter novel. Dumbledore tells Harry that his mother's love created a magical protection spell that prevents Voldemort from physically touching Harry, which is why Quirrell melted since he was hosting Voldemort. Harry returns home at the end of the school year to spend another lukewarm summer with the Dursleys as we begin the Chamber of Secrets, which mercifully has the same title in both the US and the UK. If you thought JK Rowling was done dumping lore and world building on you, think again, because the Chamber of Secrets introduces us to the slave class of the wizarding world, wizard class politics, wizard prison, and the fact that Harry absorbed some Voldemort powers when he was a baby. Wizard slaves are called house elves, and they have their own kind of magic that allows them to serve wizards without spells, including the ability to teleport within Hogwarts, which wizards themselves can't even do. One such teleporting house elf named Dobby has been stealing Harry's mail to discourage him from going back to Hogwarts, because his master, Lucius, Draco's dad, is planning to do some murdering at Hogwarts using an enchanted heirloom that belongs to Voldemort, a diary. House elves have to do whatever their masters say, and so Dobby can't directly tell Harry what's going on, but he's doing his best, in his own unhelpful way, to try and save Harry's life. After Dobby magically ruins an important business dinner Vernon Dursley is having downstairs, Harry is blockaded in his room until Ron pulls up in an enchanted car to give him a lift. The Weasleys live at a tall, ramshackle house in the country they call the Burrow, and here Harry has his first chance to see what a wizard home is like with various enchantments. Harry is introduced to the absent-minded Mr. Weasley, who works at the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office, and he gets to properly meet Ginny Weasley, who is a first year at Hogwarts this time around. It's here that we get the real start of the Harry and Ginny romance subplot, which could not have been more poorly handled in the movies. In the movies, Ginny is clearly infatuated with Harry, but then the movies just kind of forget about this plot thread for multiple films, but the books have a lot more time to casually reference the relationship with little moments. We get to actually see Ginny as a character in every book, and we watch her grow into the kind of woman Harry might actually be into, instead of Ginny and Harry simply getting thrown together at the last minute because we know it's supposed to happen by the end of the series. With Harry staying at the Burrow, he ends up tagging along with the Weasleys to Diagon Alley, where he's introduced to a new magical method of transportation in the form of flue powder, but accidentally gets diverted to the back alley shop for dark wizards called Borgin and Burke's, where he overhears Lucius Malfoy making references to his unsavory collection of dark magic artifacts, as well as to his annoyance for Arthur Weasley, who is making trouble for Lucius at the Ministry. Hagrid finds Harry and helps him get back to the Weasleys, and Harry is introduced to famous and publicity-hungry author Gilderoy Lockhart, who every witch in the entire novel is obsessed with. Lockhart is also filling in as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher since Harry melted the last one, but as will soon become clear, Lockhart doesn't actually know how to do magic very well, which makes his many self-help books a bit of a mystery. We also get to see Hermione's parents, who are Muggle dentists, in one of their brief appearances in the series, since they accompany Hermione to Diagon Alley. I wish we got to see more of Hermione's parents in these books, because they could have offered a unique point of view since they're the only living Muggles in the series who have a positive view toward wizardry, and they could have provided a fun contrast to the Dursleys. On their way to Hogwarts for their second year, and Ginny's first, Harry and Ron miss the train due to Dobby's interference, and decide to hitch a ride to school in the magical car. It gets them there in one piece, but they nearly get eaten by the Whomping Willow, a violent magical tree. This time around at Hogwarts, things kick up a notch as Harry is introduced to wizard slurs. After a bad interaction with Draco, whose dad is funding the Slytherin Quidditch team, Draco calls Hermione a mudblood, because both of her parents were ordinary Muggles, while Draco himself is a pureblood wizard since both of his parents were magical. Because Hermione and Harry both grew up in Muggle homes, neither of them know what the word means, though obviously Hermione can tell she's being insulted from context. Ron, however, grew up in the magical world, so he can explain about wizard elitism. Also at Hogwarts, there are, for some reason, completely unexplained ghosts who haunt the school, such as Moaning Myrtle, who haunts a broken women's restroom. Another such ghost is former Gryffindor, nearly headless Nick. Ghosts celebrate the day they died and were turned into ghosts as a kind of birthday party, and Nick makes Harry, and ultimately Ron and Hermione, go to his party in exchange for helping Harry avoid getting in trouble with the caretaker Argus Filch. The night of the party, the gang finds themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time when they come across nearly headless Nick and Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris, who have been magically petrified, and a menacing message has been written on the Hogwarts corridor. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Once again, Harry needs to be filled in on what the heck that means. And so Harry is given some exposition on how Salazar Slytherin, one of the 4 titular school founders who formed the school houses, was a massive wizard supremacist and didn't want Muggleborns to be admitted to Hogwarts, a sentiment shared by modern-day dark wizards. A descendant of Salazar Slytherin, his heir, can open the Chamber of Secrets within Hogwarts and unleash a monster hidden there by Salazar to oppose those who don't share his views. Just like last year, Harry, Ron, and Hermione have a suspect for who the book's baddie is, and they assume it's Draco Malfoy, since Draco is a huge blood purity guy. But the rest of the school has a different idea, which is that it's Harry himself. In conjunction with being found at the scene of the crime, Harry is revealed to be a Parseltongue, giving him the ability to communicate and control snakes, which is a very Slytherin-y type of power shared by Voldemort. Harry even starts to doubt whether he should be in Gryffindor House, since the Sorting Hat once told him he could have been great in Slytherin. Harry and Ron's next move is to test their theory that Draco is the heir of Slytherin by going undercover as Slytherin students, using Polyjuice Potion to disguise themselves as Draco's sidekicks. Draco reveals that he isn't the heir, but he does let slip the info that the Chamber of Secrets was opened once before, and a Muggle-born student was killed. As Harry investigates further, he gets a hold of a mysterious diary someone has discarded, and he finds that the diary is enchanted so that Harry can communicate with the memory of the person who owned it, a TM Riddle. Riddle gives Harry backstory from when the chamber was opened last, and Harry sees how Tom Riddle turned in Hagrid as the culprit due to Hagrid's love of dangerous creatures, resulting in Hagrid being expelled. Harry also learns that Riddle was a half-blood Slytherin student, and that he was an orphan like Harry. For a while, things seem to quiet down as there are no more attacks at the school, but when Harry's diary goes missing, a new victim becomes petrified. Hermione. People cool off on calling out Harry as the attacker because they know that she and Harry are good friends, but things go from bad to worse when Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, arrives and sends Hagrid to the wizard prison Azkaban on the presumption that he is responsible for the attacks, and Dumbledore is suspended as headmaster. After a harrowing side adventure into the Forbidden Forest to talk to a giant spider who's friends with Hagrid, Harry and Ron learn that the ghost, Moaning Myrtle, was the student who died during the first attack on the school. And worse, Ginny has been marked next for death, even though she's a pureblood. Harry and Ron attempt to swap notes with Lockhart, who's supposedly going off to fight the monster, which turns out to be a basilisk, which explains the whole Slytherin and Parseltongue thing. But instead, they find Lockhart packing and leaving Ginny to die. Harry and Ron threaten Lockhart and make him go with them to fight the basilisk, but Lockhart reveals that he's a fraud who doesn't know how to do anything, and that he just erased the memories of people whose work he plagiarized. Fittingly, his own attempt to erase Harry and Ron's memories go awry, and Lockhart ends up erasing his own memory, but also causing a cave-in. Ron stays behind to fix the tunnel, while Harry ventures onward. In the monster's lair, Harry finds a version of Voldemort, the alter ego of Tom Riddle. A piece of his soul was trapped in the diary and is using Ginny's life force to bring himself back to life. Tom also reveals that he was possessing Ginny, who was susceptible to his influence while she wrote about her admiration for Harry in the diary. With the help of Dumbledore's pet Phoenix, Harry proves himself more Gryffindor than he is Slytherin by summoning the sword of Godric Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat and slaying the basilisk, then using one of its fangs to destroy the diary and the piece of Voldemort. Hagrid is freed from Azkaban, and Dumbledore is reinstated as headmaster, much to the chagrin of Lucius Malfoy, who had tried to orchestrate Dumbledore's removal. Lucius had also hoped to frame Ginny for the murders, since that would have discredited her father, but that plan is shish kebab at this point. Nobody can pin anything on Lucius, unfortunately, but Harry further rains on Lucius's parade by tricking him into freeing his house elf Dobby. Dumbledore also gives us a fresh exposition dump, which is that Harry absorbed the ability to speak Parseltongue from Voldemort when Voldemort failed to kill him, impressing upon Harry some of his power. Harry has once again defeated dark wizardry at the school, but in the next book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, things don't revolve around Voldemort directly, but instead around dark wizard Sirius Black, who has escaped from Azkaban as the first ever escapee. To start things off with a bang, Harry accidentally inflates his aunt into a balloon with magic. Because the book takes place in Britain, and Harry doesn't have his license to do magic outside of school until he turns 17. Harry assumes he will be expelled, and so he decides to hit the road with all of his magical gear before wizard authorities arrive to stop him. But the wizard authorities have different priorities just now, because the Ministry of Magic believes that Sirius Black is on his way to kill Harry Potter, just like he supposedly killed his friend Peter Pettigrew. When the Minister of Magic catches up with the fugitive Harry in Diagon Alley, he decides to ignore Harry's use of unlicensed magic, because he's just happy to have tracked him down before Sirius Black. Harry sticks around Diagon Alley until school starts, which gives him the chance to catch up with Hermione and the Weasleys when they drop by to purchase school books. Hermione also decides to purchase her first pet. Hermione goes for a cat, which starts an ongoing feud because the cat keeps trying to eat Ron's rat, who is constantly terrified during the book. This third book also introduces the reader to arguably the scariest villains of the Harry Potter universe, the hooded Dementors who guard Azkaban prison and feed on happiness and telepathically drudge up your worst memories. One might rightfully ask, why on earth are the wizards employing what are obviously the bad guys, which is exactly what Dumbledore keeps saying. Harry first encounters a Dementor when on the train to Hogwarts, because Cornelius Fudge has dispatched them to guard the school in case Sirius Black drops by. Harry has a particularly bad reaction to the Dementors, because he has experienced more horror in his life than the average person. But this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Remus Lupin, drives the Dementor off. Other new faculty introduced this year include the divination professor Sybil Trelawney and, incredibly, Hagrid, who is teaching a class on the care of beasts now that his reputation is repaired, having been cleared of the Chamber of Secrets murder. And can I just pause here and say that I love JK Rowling's little winks she does with all the professors' names in these books? There's straightforward stuff like how Lupin comes from the Latin root meaning wolf, since, as will be revealed later, Professor Lupin is secretly a werewolf. But there's also stuff that's a little more obscure, like how Sibyl's name comes from the ancient Sibylline oracles, or possibly Sybil herself, who was a prophetess at Delphi. Like the Delphic oracle, Sybil Trelawney occasionally tells the future when possessed by a spirit of prophecy, but this happens very rarely, and she doesn't even know it's happening. So she's mostly a fraud who makes up fortunes and wastes her students' time. Lupin, on the other hand, is the first and possibly last Defense Against the Dark Arts professor to be any good at his job. And Harry learns a lot from him, even taking special lessons to drive away Dementors, so that he doesn't have such a rough time with them guarding the school this year. Soon more drama unfolds with Sirius Black, who attempts to break into the Gryffindor common room. No one can quite figure out how Sirius is moving around so discreetly, which makes him all the more mysterious. As the story unfolds, Harry also learns that his father, James, was friends with Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, and incredibly, Sirius Black. On the more mundane side, third-year students gain access to Hogsmeade, an all-wizard village near the school. There's just one problem. Harry needs his legal guardian's permission to get in, and the Dursleys aren't exactly forthcoming after he blew up his aunt. Harry also loses his expensive broom he used for playing Quidditch when the Whomping Willow eats it, so he's not having the best time. Luckily, Fred and George Weasley reveal that they have a magical map that tells them where everyone is, which they've been using to pull pranks. and they give it to Harry so he can get into Hogsmeade with the other students. Thanks to his dad's invisibility cloak, Harry is able to sneak out of the school and join his friends for a butterbeer, which is a very watered down but actually alcoholic beer that wizards give children because this book takes place in Europe. Using his cloak, Harry overhears more details about how his parents died by listening to the professors and Cornelius Fudge. The Potters were using a Fidelis charm, which hides you unless the person to whom you entrust your location reveals the information, and they entrusted the info to Sirius Black, Harry's godfather. Harry is irate that no one told him how close Black was to the Potters, and he heads over to Hagrid's hut to give Hagrid a piece of his mind. But Hagrid is busy because the Ministry of Magic is going to kill one of his favorite monsters, a hippogriff, for poking Malfoy during class, so Harry relents. Harry, Ron, and Hermione briefly stop being friends with each other because Hermione's cat keeps trying to eat Ron's rat, and Hermione gets Harry's new broom confiscated because she thinks it might be a trap from Sirius Black. Hermione and Harry become friends again pretty quickly, especially after he gets the broom back, but Ron and Hermione stay at odds. As the Quidditch season continues, Harry has a chance to use his new anti-Dementor training from Lupin, which involves summoning a blue protector with the Patronus charm. It turns out that this wasn't a Dementor, but just Malfoy messing with Harry, but it was still good practice. This book is also the first mention of Cho Chang, a Ravenclaw seeker who Harry thinks is cute. Ron and Hermione become friends again to support Hagrid as the execution of his monster looms near, and Professor Trelawney demonstrates that she actually can tell the future by spoiling the end of this book and the next book in a prophetic vision. Ron briefly recovers his rat, who didn't get eaten after all, but the rat seems to be terrified and tries to escape. Ultimately, the whole gang gets chased or coerced into a secret tunnel under the school, and there they find Sirius Black, who it turns out isn't trying to kill Harry, but Ron's rat instead, who is really Peter Pettigrew in disguise, the true spy for Voldemort and Fidelis Charm's secret keeper. Professor Lupin shows up and explains that James, Sirius, and Peter were all animagus, shapeshifters. They found the rituals to turn themselves into animals in order to keep Lupin company when he became a werewolf every month. Being able to turn into a dog also helped Sirius stay sane when exposed to the Dementors in Azkaban, because as a dog, his emotions were more simplistic. Snape arrives to crash the party, and because James and his friends bullied him as a kid, he's not in any mood to listen to stories about mistaken identity. The gang knocks out Snape, and Harry convinces Sirius to spare Peter. They all head back to Hogwarts, intending to clear Sirius's name by presenting the very alive Peter Pettigrew, but Lupin forgets that it was his time of the month, which gives Peter a chance to escape. Dementors appear, but a figure arrives and summons an unusually powerful Patronus to drive them away, before Harry passes out. Harry wakes up in the hospital, which he does 2 to 3 times every book, and tries to explain that Sirius Black is innocent. Dumbledore believes him, of course, but Cornelius Fudge isn't having any of it, and he's sending the Dementors after Black. Luckily, Hermione has the power to travel through time. Now, I know that sounds stupid when I say it like that, and that's because it is. And it doesn't get any less stupid when I explain why, which is that the Ministry of Magic gave her a time travel device, a time turner, so she can take extra classes that conflict with each other during the school year. Now let me say that again. The Ministry of Magic, which doesn't trust teenage wizards to use magic outside school at all, trusts one 13-year-old with the power to travel through time. This is by far the dumbest piece of lore the series introduces, but here at least, unlike in a certain stage play, the time travel is presented in a way that doesn't totally break the plot, because it can only be used to create a closed loop, so nothing can actually change from the perspective of the time traveler. Dumbledore sends Harry and Hermione back in time where they rescue Hagrid's hippogriff. Harry rescues himself with his own Patronus, and the pair rescues Sirius Black from custody, who becomes Harry's pen pal. Harry happily lets the Dursleys know that he is a convicted murderer as a godfather, so they won't bug him so much. I know a lot of people love Book 3, but for me, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is where I went from being pretty interested in these books as a kid to absolutely having to blitz through them, which is good because Rowling doubles the size of the books going forward, turning them into just massive volumes, which means the movie adaptions have to cut huge sections of the story just to get things down to a 2.5-hour runtime, such as Hermione's activism for elf rights, or in some cases cutting out multiple ensemble characters completely. The movies also have to cut the downtime from the book, the sections where people just sit around chatting, and that kind of stuff really builds the characters in a way you don't really get when you only have the highlights from the movie. Or, in fact, in a video like this. Make sure you read the books too if for some reason you got this far and you haven't done that. There's a lot I'm just not able to cover, even though I'm spoiling so much stuff. The Goblet of Fire opens with Harry getting a dream of Voldemort up to mischief with Peter Pettigrew, a dream caused by his scar which connects him to the Dark Wizard. This is a really helpful way to move the plot forward during the rest of the series, because it gives Rowling a plausible way to deliver important information to Harry and get special insight into what Voldemort is up to. Ron has invited Harry to come to the Burrow and then attend the Quidditch World Cup with Ron's family. Unfortunately for the Dursleys, Ron's dad tries to pick Harry up using flu powder, which ends up destroying the living room. Mr. Weasley fixes it with magic, but that doesn't exactly make things better to Uncle Vernon. At the Burrow, Harry and Ron meet up with Hermione, who's also joined them there as they prepare for the big sporting event. We also get to see Fred and George in the process of turning their penchant for jokes into a real career, with their candy and magical oddities business, much to the chagrin of Mrs. Weasley, who thinks it's all a waste of time. To get to the Quidditch Cup, we're presented with a new type of wizard transportation, a portkey, which is just an ordinary object enchanted to make you go somewhere. Using the portkey, the gang head to the Quidditch World Cup, which is at a large campsite. This book continues a theme first presented in earlier novels, which is that wizards spend so much time with their own kind, and wearing wizard robes, that they have no idea how muggles dress, which makes being incognito at the campsite very difficult when a muggle happens to see them. The later movies and prequels basically drop this element, which creates weird continuity issues with regard to wizard fashion sense. At the match, Harry meets Ludo Bagman, who works for the Ministry of Magic. He catches up with the self-important Percy Weasley, who is now working for the Ministry as well, and also encounters Winky the House Elf, whose master is Barty Crouch, another Ministry official. The Quidditch World Cup features the professional teams from Ireland and Bulgaria going head-to-head, and Fred and George find themselves betting all their money against Ludo Bagman on the outcome of the match, in the hopes of using the money to finance their new business. After Ireland wins the match, and Fred and George guess the details correct on their wager, Ludo Bagman welches on their bet and refuses to pay them, though he brushes it off for the time being. After everyone goes back to their tents at the campsite, we are dramatically introduced to the villainous Death Eaters, Voldemort's biggest supporters. Up until now, the series has just generically referred to anyone who worked with Voldemort as a dark wizard. Some Death Eaters were sent to Azkaban, but many simply went into hiding or tried to pretend that they never supported Voldemort at all. When attacking muggles or mudblood wizards, the Death Eaters leave behind the Dark Mark, a calling card that hasn't been seen since the fall of Voldemort, and a symbol that was also branded onto Death Eaters' arms. Winky shows up holding Harry's wand, which recently went missing, and Barty Crouch dismisses her on the spot, even though she obviously didn't cast the mark herself. At school, it's announced that a special international event is being held at Hogwarts this year, hosted by Bagman and Crouch, the Triwizard Tournament, where 3 students are selected from 3 different wizarding schools to compete in a series of trials for glory and a cash prize. There's also yet another staff shakeup at the school, because Professor Lupin was forced out last year for being a werewolf. He is replaced by Alastar Moody, or Mad-Eye Moody, on account of his magical eye which sees through everything. Moody is a former Auror, which are elite Ministry of Magic detectives who hunt down dark wizards. Moody's teaching style is very unique, and he begins by teaching about the forbidden curses used by dark wizards, the unforgivable curses which control, torture, or kill, Imperio, Crucio, and Avada Kedavra, respectively. Unforgivable because you get sent to Azkaban if you use them. Harry has a chance to demonstrate that he is a colossally stubborn protagonist by resisting the Imperius Curse when Moody tests it on him. Next up, the book introduces us to the other 2 schools which will be represented in the Triwizard Tournament, Beauxbaton and Durmstrang, which seem to be from France and somewhere in northern Europe. The French school is headed by Madame Maxime, another half-giant witch like Hagrid, though she denies it because of the stigma of being a half-blood. While Durmstrang is headed by Igor Karkaroff, a former Death Eater who escaped an Azkaban sentence by turning state's evidence 13 years ago. The 3 students that are chosen to compete in the Triwizard Tournament are selected via the Goblet of Fire, a magical cup which spits out the names of worthy volunteers. The names picked are the beautiful Fleur Delacour from Beauxbatons, the professional Quidditch player Victor Crumb from Durmstrang, and Hufflepuff Cedric Diggory from Hogwarts. Everything seems poised for Harry not to be the center of attention this year until a 4th name is released from the Goblet of Fire, and wouldn't you know it, it's Harry's name, making this not so much the Triwizard Tournament as the Quadrawizard Tournament. Most people at school are annoyed at Harry again because they think he put his own name in the Goblet of Fire, and the Hufflepuffs are mad that their chance of being in the spotlight for once is getting upstaged. The Ravenclaw seeker Cho Chang wishes Harry luck, however. The interpersonal drama gets more complex in this book as well, because we get to explore Ron's jealousy at Harry always being the center of attention, and Hermione and Ron's romantic affection for each other. There's also extra trouble with a nosy reporter named Rita Skeeter trying to lambast the Ministry at every opportunity, and making Harry look worse by making him seem more arrogant. The first task of the Triwizard Tournament is nothing big, just fighting a dragon. It's supposed to be a secret, but one way or another, everyone finds out and prepares in advance. All except for Cedric, so Harry drops him a hint so that it's an even playing field. Harry is able to summon his broom and lure the dragon away from a golden egg that contains the clue as to his next trial of the tournament, and the danger of the event helps Ron reconcile with Harry. Meanwhile, Hermione is hard at work on her social activism for house elves, starting the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, with the unfortunate acronym SPEW. Hermione is unhappy to discover that house elves make all the food at Hogwarts, and she visits them in the kitchen with Ron and Harry, where they find a recently employed Dobby. Winky has also ended up there, but she's not doing well, and has turned into an alcoholic because of how depressed she is at being dismissed by Barty Crouch. Next up is the Yule Ball, where the Triwizard champions and older students generally are expected to bring a date to go to a formal dance. Harry screws up his courage to ask out Cho Chang, but Cedric gets there first. When a disgruntled Harry gets back to the Gryffindor common room, he finds that Ron tried to ask out Fleur Delacour, which was more than a bit of a long shot, and Ginny is there trying to comfort him, though she mostly thinks it's funny. The next couple pages provide some delightfully awkward interactions where it's obvious that Ginny is still secretly crushing on Harry, but already said she would go to the dance with Neville Longbottom, and Ron completely botches an interaction with Hermione while trying to pick her as his backup date, and she roasts him for some comments he made earlier.
"All the good-looking ones taken, Ron?" said Hermione loftily. "Well, I'm sure you'll find someone somewhere who'll have you." But Ron was staring at Hermione as though suddenly seeing her in a whole new light. "Hermione, Neville's right. You are a girl." "Oh, well spotted," she said acidly. "Well, you can come with one of us." "I can't come with you, because I'm already going with someone." "No, you're not," said Ron. "You just said that to get rid of Neville." "Oh, did I?" said Hermione, and her eyes flashed dangerously. "Just because it's taken you 3 years to notice, Ron, doesn't mean no one else has spotted I'm a girl."
Because everyone else turned them down, Harry and Ron outsource their dates to Parvati and Padma Patil, who they don't know as well. There's lots more teen drama at the ball, but the big revelation is that Hermione went with Victor Krum, which is a bit of a blow to Ron. And we get the subtext spelled out for the slow readers when Hermione says,
"Next time there's a ball, ask me before someone else does and not as a last resort."
After the ball, Cedric returns Harry's favor about the dragons by hinting that the golden egg needs to be opened underwater to hear the next clue. After learning that the next trial will involve the mermaids that live in the Hogwarts lake, Harry nearly gets caught by Snape, since he's not supposed to be wandering the halls at night. Professor Moody covers for Harry, but asks to borrow the Marauder's map, which turns out to be one of the stupidest things Harry ever says yes to. Following this, Harry does the next trial, which is to rescue someone you care about from beneath the lake, either a family member, friend, or someone you brought to the ball. Harry misunderstands the trial and thinks everyone is really in danger, so he tries to rescue the other hostages, which the judges think merits extra points. Rita Skeeter then releases an article claiming Harry and Hermione and Victor Krum are in a love triangle, though Harry and Hermione have no romantic interest in each other at all. But even though the article is made up, it included direct quotes of things Victor Krum said to Hermione at the Yule Ball, and it makes Hermione very suspicious as to how Rita is getting her information. Sirius Black is back in town, incognito as a dog, and he fills Harry in on some important lore about Barty Crouch. Crouch was once a shoo-in for the new Minister of Magic, and during Voldemort's rise to power, Crouch used extreme methods to catch Death Eaters, such as authorizing the use of unforgivable curses by Aurors, and for sentencing people to Azkaban without a trial, like Sirius himself in fact. But Crouch's approval sank at the Ministry when his own son, Barty Crouch Jr., turned out to be a Death Eater. Another great way to communicate information to our protagonist is also introduced in the Goblet of Fire, which is the Pensieve, which is Wizard VR for magically recorded memories. When waiting for Dumbledore in his office later in the book, Harry snoops around Dumbledore's Pensieve and watches memories from various Ministry of Magic trials. Finally, Harry comes to the third task, where he must navigate a maze and touch the Triwizard Cup. He and Cedric touch it at the same moment to claim a joint Hogwarts victory, but it turns out that the cup is a portkey, and it takes them to front row seats for Voldemort's resurrection. Voldemort has been able to turn himself into a shriveled old baby at this point, but using dark rituals involving Harry's blood, Voldemort regains a new body, and summons his Death Eater friends using the Dark Mark. Voldemort kills Cedric and tries to kill Harry, thinking that because he used Harry's blood, Harry's mother's protection won't work anymore. Voldemort is half right, but this time our Deus Ex Machina is that the twin cores of Voldemort and Harry's wands are mutually incompatible and do weird things when they interact with each other. In the confusion, Harry makes it back to the school using the portkey and tries to tell people what happened. Not only does Cornelius Fudge refuse to believe that Voldemort is back because of how much that would suck, but Professor Moody turns out to be Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, and he abducts Harry. Dumbledore and the gang show up to quickly sort things out, and we learn that Barty Jr. was secretly freed from Azkaban by his father, but kept under the Imperius Curse for over a decade, in order to keep him from getting into mischief. After briefly breaking free of the curse, Barty Jr. summoned the Dark Mark at the start of the book, and with Voldemort's help, he went incognito as Moody using Polyjuice Potion, the real Moody being stuck in a trunk in his office. As the book concludes, battle lines are drawn between Fudge's policy of pretending Voldemort isn't back, and Dumbledore's friends who start to prepare for the inevitable battle. Dumbledore even forces Snape and Sirius to collaborate, even though they hate each other. Harry gets a buttload of money for winning the Triwizard Tournament, but he doesn't really need it because his parents left him all their cash. So he gives it to Fred and George, who could never get their money back from Ludo Bagman, who went on the run for gambling debts to goblins. Hermione also solves the riddle of how Rita Skeeter got all her exclusive quotes, which is by being another unregistered animagus, and Hermione traps her in bug form to teach her a lesson. The next installment, The Order of the Phoenix, was my favorite as a kid. I think because it hits that sweet spot where stuff has actually started happening now that Voldemort is back for real, but the situation isn't horribly depressing like in the 7th book. The Order of the Phoenix is named after Dumbledore's secret inner circle to fight the Death Eaters, a secret inner circle that Harry is excluded from all summer, because Dumbledore has realized that Harry's exposition-dumping scar is impressing Voldemort's consciousness onto Harry, and he wants to keep Harry out of the mix for now. For the first time, something dangerous and magical happens, not in the wizarding world, but in the world of the Dursleys, when Dudley and Harry are attacked by Dementors. Though underage and unlicensed to practice magic, Harry has to summon a Patronus. This forces the Dursleys' neighbor Mrs. Figg to reveal that she is an undercover operative for Dumbledore. Mrs. Figg was supposed to have backup from Order of the Phoenix member and thief Mundungus Fletcher, but he's slacking off and not around. Harry casting a Patronus results in his immediate expulsion from Hogwarts, and a letter telling him that his wand will be destroyed, so Harry gets ready to run like in the 2nd book. But Dumbledore gets the Ministry to wait until there's a hearing at the Ministry of Magic. Because Harry is the sole witness to the return of Voldemort, and because Cornelius Fudge is pretending Voldemort isn't back, Fudge has been directing the wizard media to lambast Harry in the papers. Harry getting expelled would be just a bonus. Dudley isn't doing well after the Dementor encounter, and Aunt Petunia reveals a surprising amount of wizard knowledge by explaining what a Dementor is to Uncle Vernon. When Uncle Vernon understands that Voldemort has returned, he decides to kick Harry out, but Dumbledore sends a letter convincing Aunt Petunia to convince Uncle Vernon to let Harry stay. Next, Harry is picked up by the Order of the Phoenix, a motley collection of professional and amateur Death Eater fighters, most of whom get deleted in the movies. Returning characters include Mad-Eye Moody, the real one this time, as well as ex-Professor Lupin, and new character Nymphadora Tonks. The gang takes Harry to number 12 Grimmauld Place, a house protected by the Fidelis charm, but by more trustworthy people this time. Grimmauld Place is Sirius Black's old family home, shared by his pureblood-loving family elf Kreacher, which serves as the headquarters for the Order. Although Hermione, Ron, and Ginny aren't allowed to join the Order because they're too young, they've been allowed to visit Grimmauld Place during the summer, even though Harry is excluded, which doesn't exactly improve Harry's mood. Fred and George have been hard at work with the money Harry left them, though, and they've invented extendable ears to help spy on the grown-ups. This 5th book further builds on the complexity of the interpersonal and social dynamics of the 4th book, as Rowling tries to slightly elevate the reading level, though it's still very much for children. The most interesting dynamic is the power of how the media can shape public perception, since over the course of the summer, the wizarding world has turned against Harry thanks to Fudge's smear campaign. Tensions have boiled over between Percy, who wants to advance his career at the Ministry, and the rest of the Weasley family, who support Dumbledore, even as Dumbledore's social capital has plummeted. Sirius Black is also not getting along with Molly Weasley because Molly feels like Sirius is treating Harry as if he's a substitute James Potter, rather than trying to keep Harry safe. Bill and Charlie Weasley, Ron's 2 oldest brothers, have joined the Order of the Phoenix alongside their parents, and Bill and Charlie at least have no drama going on, although Bill is dating Fleur Delacour. Sirius fills Harry in on what Voldemort is doing, despite Molly's protests, and Harry learns that Voldemort is amassing an army like he had 14 years ago, but doing so quietly while the Ministry pretends nothing is wrong. Dumbledore, meanwhile, is getting absolutely dragged for his support of Harry, and demoted from every prestigious association of wizards. Later on, Harry has to go to the Ministry to sort out his use of magic. Fudge tries to pull a fast one at the last minute by switching the location of the hearing to the basement used for trying Death Eaters, so that Dumbledore won't be able to make it, which obviously doesn't work because it's Dumbledore. Fudge also has Harry tried by the Wisengamot, which is like having a hearing over a speeding ticket dealt with by the US Supreme Court. But luckily Harry is cleared and allowed to keep his wand, though Fudge hints that he will soon be changing the laws to give himself more direct control over Hogwarts. In Fudge's mind, Dumbledore is a dangerous insurgent who is going to try to take the Ministry away from him, and is probably amassing an army of his own at Hogwarts, which is sort of true since Dumbledore is trying to secure allies against Voldemort, but not for the reasons the Minister Master of Magic is suggesting. Back at Grimmauld Place, despite being cleared and allowed to go back to school, Harry is being an angry teenager, which is his dominant state in Book 5. Although Dumbledore did show up to defend Harry at the trial, he skipped out immediately after and refused to talk to Harry. And to rub salt in the wound, Dumbledore made both Hermione and Ron school prefects and not Harry. On the train to Hogwarts, we're introduced to a new character called Luna Lovegood, a slightly insane girl whose father runs the conspiracy theory wizard newspaper called The Quibbler. Luna and Harry are the only ones who can see spectral horses pulling carriages to Hogwarts, which are called thestrals. They only appear to people who have seen someone die, like Harry did when Cedric died. It's worth noting that this makes no sense at all because even if you don't count Harry's parents' death when he was a baby, Harry literally killed Quirrell in Book 1, so he should already be able to see thestrals. Like the divided court at the Ministry, Harry finds that his fellow students at Hogwarts are divided over whether they believe him about Voldemort or not, which is honestly a nice change from everyone either collectively hating or collectively loving Harry depending on the book. The worst defense against the dark arts teacher yet arrives at school this year in the person of Professor Umbridge, who is at Hogwarts not so much to teach as to serve as a propaganda arm of the Ministry, and outright forbids actual practical defensive magic. When Harry speaks up about the looming threat of Voldemort, Umbridge literally tortures him by mutilating his skin during detention, writing the words, "I must not tell lies." Harry is a legendary hater though, and he would literally rather be tortured than have people tell him what to do, so he keeps getting tortured all semester. The idealistic Hermione hasn't abandoned her dream of house elf liberation this year, and this time around she's started knitting hats and secretly trying to get house elves to take them when they clean the Gryffindor common room, since a house elf who is given clothes is freed. But the actual house elves themselves don't really want to be freed, so Dobby, who is already free, just cleans Gryffindor common room solo and collects all the hats himself. As Umbridge continues her push to ruin everyone's wizardy education, Hermione talks Harry into doing something radical, teaching a covert defense against the dark arts class himself, based on all of his experience of not dying to Voldemort, and a large group of students show up at a secret meeting in Hogsmeade. As a tongue-in-cheek jab at Fudge's worst fear, Ginny names the group Dumbledore's Army. At the worst possible time, Umbridge disbands all school clubs and associations, and permanently bans Fred, George, and Harry from playing Quidditch, his favorite thing to do, with Ginny replacing him as Gryffindor Seeker, and Ron having joined the team earlier in the year. Luckily, Dobby helps Harry find a secret room where he can practice with his Dumbledore's Army students, the Room of Requirement, which adapts itself to the needs of the user. Things seem to be turning up for Harry when his new secret defense classes start going well, and Cho Chang and he make out. But that night, Harry has another vision of Voldemort, this time telling his snake Nagini to kill Ron's dad. With Harry's information, the Order of the Phoenix is able to save Mr. Weasley, but Harry feels responsible because in his dream he felt Voldemort's desire to kill, and Harry overhears Mad-Eye Moody saying that he's worried Harry is becoming possessed by Lord Voldemort. Harry is staying at number 12 Grimmauld over the holidays, but he decides he better go on the run if Voldemort is possessing him, so he can't accidentally pass information about the Order of the Phoenix. However, a magical portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black, a former headmaster back at Hogwarts and a relative of Sirius, tells Harry that Dumbledore wants him to stay where he is. Phineas Black is a great character, and that Hogwarts video game absolutely cannibalized him. Black has great lines dissing Harry for being a whiny brat, and he's just a very funny addition to the world. Ron, Hermione, and Ginny try to help Harry, but he initially brushes them off because they have no idea what he's going through. Then, in a moment of consistent continuity, Rowling has Ginny tell Harry he's full of it.
"I didn't want anyone to talk to me," said Harry, who was feeling more and more nettled. "Well, that was a bit stupid of you," said Ginny angrily, "seeing as you don't know anyone but me who's been possessed by you-know-who, and I can tell you how it feels." "I forgot," he said. "Lucky you," said Ginny coolly.
But although Harry isn't being full-on possessed, Dumbledore sends Harry to special occlumency lessons with Snape, which is the discipline that stops mind reading, which is something that Snape has had to be very good at since he once acted as a double agent for Dumbledore against Voldemort. But in addition to not being very good at occlumency, Snape and Harry's mutual hatred of each other makes the lessons not very fruitful, especially when Harry invades Snape's mind and sees his dad bullying Snape, which is unpleasant for both of them. Meanwhile, all the Death Eaters escape from Azkaban because the Dementors really aren't following Ministry orders anymore now that Voldemort is back. In an effort to change the public perception of Harry's claims about Voldemort's return, Hermione sets up an interview for Harry with Rita Skeeter, who Hermione is still blackmailing, to write an article for the Quibbler to tell the real story, the only paper that would risk printing something like that. Unfortunately, Harry mentions this meeting while on a date with Cho Chang, who thinks Harry is going out with multiple women at once, which ultimately leads to their relationship getting scuttled for good, after a friend of Cho's called Marietta Edgecombe informs Umbridge about Harry's secret classes. Dumbledore takes the fall for Harry's practicing so that the students aren't expelled, and he goes on the run, with Umbridge becoming headmistress at Hogwarts. Since Fred and George already have their new business lined up thanks to Harry, they really don't care much anymore about school or exams, and they organize a gigantic series of pranks and disruptions before climactically escaping on their brooms. As the book nears its conclusion, Harry receives a dream of Voldemort torturing Sirius at the Ministry of Magic in somewhere called the Department of Mysteries. While Harry is trying to communicate with Sirius to verify the dream, Umbridge catches Harry and reveals that it was she who sent the Dementors after him in the first place, making Umbridge not so much a twist villain as just a gradually worse one. Hermione and Harry trick Umbridge into getting abducted by centaurs in the Forbidden Forest, and then they join Ginny, Neville, and Luna on a rescue mission to the Department of Mysteries. At the Department of Mysteries, the gang walk into a trap full of Death Eaters because Harry's vision was a fake sent by Voldemort. But thanks to Harry's training, the gang stay alive long enough for the Order of the Phoenix to arrive. At the Department of Mysteries is a prophecy about a person who could destroy Lord Voldemort, and only Harry is able to retrieve it, which is what Voldemort has been trying to get to this whole book. While in the Department of Mysteries, Rowling makes a point of mentioning that all the Ministry's time turners got destroyed during the battle, which helps save her from having to cover for awkward continuity issues over the next couple of books. Sirius Black is killed by Death Eater Bellatrix Lestrange, now escaped from Azkaban, and in a rage, Harry casts the Cruciatus Curse on her. Harry actually ends up casting Unforgivables multiple times in the next couple books, and nobody ever brings it up again despite how big of a deal that's supposed to be. Voldemort himself arrives, but Dumbledore duels him while annoying the heck out of him by calling Voldemort by his given name, Tom. Tom escapes, but luckily Fudge shows up and finally sees evidence that he can't ignore of Voldemort's return, so he directs the wizard papers to switch gears and stop lambasting Dumbledore and Harry. Many of the Death Eaters escape, but Lucius Malfoy finally gets caught and sent to Azkaban, at least for a little while. Dumbledore once again has a little chat with Harry at the end of the book to explain everything that just happened. Dumbledore justifies being distant with Harry due to the connection to Voldemort, and he discusses the full version of the prophecy, which was given by Professor Trelawney in one of her rare moments of accurate fortune-telling. Now, Voldemort only ever heard the first half of the prophecy, or else he might not have been so hasty in trying to kill Harry when he was a baby, since Voldemort didn't know he was in so much danger. And in deciding to kill Harry, Voldemort actually made the prophecy about Harry, instead of about Neville Longbottom, another wizard born around the same time. Dumbledore also explains that the reason he keeps sending Harry back to live with the Dursleys is that Lily Potter's protection magic from her sacrificial death, though reduced by the events of the fourth book, still protects Harry while he lives with blood relatives, but that protection will end when Harry comes of age in the wizarding world, which is when he turns 17 in Book 7. So Harry has to go back to the Dursleys for 2 more summers so that he can technically still call it home, which will keep him safe. Mourning the loss of Sirius, Harry confronts nearly headless Nick in one of the few really interesting uses for this character. Harry asks how he can see the ghost of Sirius, but Nick explains that though wizards can choose to become ghosts, this is cowardly and most wizards don't do this, instead choosing to face their fate in the afterlife. This conversation is really the beginning of what seems to be the ultimate thesis of these books, which is to accept death as a natural part of life. Book 6 has a super fun opening where we finally get to see how the Ministry of Magic actually interfaces with the rest of the British government, and it's absolutely criminal that we didn't get this scene in the movies. The book shows us Cornelius Fudge meeting with a newly elected Prime Minister in the near past, and revealing to him the magical world, which apparently is the duty of the Minister of Magic. And then we see episodes taking place during the next several books, with Cornelius Fudge having to give updates on things like the escape of Sirius Black, and then the innocence of Sirius Black. And then, news about Fudge himself getting sacked for sucking so bad. Fudge is replaced by a hardliner wizard named Rufus Scrimjaw, who though ostensibly more devoted to beating Voldemort, also locks up people who aren't Death Eaters, just so he can make it seem like he's doing something. Book 6 also presents us with the dilemma of whether Snape is actually on Team Voldemort or not. This is especially true of this book, because Snape makes a magical vow to Draco's mom Narcissa to accomplish a special mission Voldemort has entrusted to Draco, which will turn out to be killing Dumbledore. Obviously, Draco Malfoy isn't capable of that, and it's a suicide mission Voldemort gave him to punish Lucius for not only failing to get the prophecy in the last book, but also for getting Voldemort's magical diary destroyed in Book 2. The next chapter is back with Harry though. Though Dumbledore looms large in the books, he's usually a character who's featured very sporadically, but in this installment the Dumbledore scenes are aplenty because this is our last book with him. Right off the bat, we get Dumbledore himself arriving at the Dursleys' house to absolutely roast them for their mistreatment of Harry, as well as to tell Harry that Sirius Black left Harry everything in his will, including Kreacher, who now obeys Harry's orders, though with extreme hatred since he wants to help the Death Eaters. If the Tolkien diehards will pardon the comparison, the way Gandalf encourages Frodo to treat Gollum is a lot like how Dumbledore encourages Harry to treat Kreacher, which will eventually result in a kind of rehabilitation of him in Book 7. Dumbledore then takes Harry away to spend the rest of his summer with the Weasleys at the Burrow, but first, Dumbledore and Harry visit Horace Slughorn, a not especially evil former Slytherin, but very vain and with a penchant for important social connections. Dumbledore brings along Harry so that Harry's renewed fame in the wizarding world, this time as the chosen one of the prophecy, can be used to coax ex-Professor Slughorn to return and teach at Hogwarts. Harry assumes that Dumbledore is filling the constantly shifting position of the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, but instead, Slughorn is teaching potions, leaving the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher finally open to Snape, who's been coveting it for a long time. Before Dumbledore departs and leaves Harry at the Burrow, Dumbledore mysteriously tells Harry that he will be teaching him private lessons this year. Harry spends some time at the Burrow with Hermione, the Weasleys, and Fleur Delacour, who is engaged to Bill, before heading to Diagon Alley to pick up school supplies. There, Harry overhears Draco Malfoy up to no good at Borgin and Burke's, and Harry suspects that Draco has become a Death Eater. On the train, Harry joins Luna and Neville, who are both considered extremely uncool by the school at large, but who are in the public eye because of how highly publicized their adventure at the Department of Mysteries was. At potions class with Slughorn, Harry rises quickly to prominence because of the scribbled notes in a used textbook of someone called the Half-Blood Prince. Next, Harry has his first private lesson with Dumbledore, which turns out to be a series of lore dumps on Voldemort's backstory, using memories in the pensive, in an effort to help Harry understand more about the man who was Tom Riddle. First, Harry learns about Voldemort's mother, who was an impoverished pureblood witch who used magic to force a man she liked into marrying her. Then, Harry learns about Dumbledore's first meeting with Tom Riddle, when Dumbledore was a transfiguration professor at Hogwarts and was sent to fetch Tom Riddle from an orphanage and tell him about his magical destiny. In this memory, Harry learns that Tom has a penchant for cruelty and for collecting magical trophies. Dumbledore also explains that the real reason he invited Horace Slughorn back is that he needs a memory from Horace from when Slughorn taught Voldemort, but Horace has edited the memory because he's ashamed of the information he gave. Hermione and Ron, meanwhile, continue to argue back and forth as their will they won't they thing occupies the background of the story, and Harry starts to develop feelings for Ginny, who is dating fellow Gryffindor Dean Thomas. Harry spends Christmas at the Burrow and gets a visit from the new Minister of Magic, who tries to recruit Harry to raise the Ministry of Magic's PR and make it seem like the Ministry is doing a good job. Instead, Harry shows Scrimgeour his scars from Umbridge last year and says, "I must not tell lies." Harry cannot stop dissing important people in the later books, but it is very funny. Back at school, Harry learns to apparate, so he can teleport at will, though as Hermione tells everyone every school year, there are magical protections keeping people from teleporting directly into or out of Hogwarts. Harry uses a luck potion to have a perfect evening, where he finally convinces Horace Slughorn to give him the real memory of when he talked to Tom Riddle. Harry and Dumbledore watch the memory and see Slughorn explain to Tom about Horcruxes, a magical quick save that splits part of your soul, and to do it, you must kill someone. Voldemort reveals more of his plans here than he revealed to anyone before, and suggests the idea of making multiple Horcruxes for extra protection. And now Harry has his mission for the next book, and understands the purpose of these meetings. He must find and destroy the Horcruxes in order to finally kill Voldemort. Luckily, he's already made a good start. The diary from Book 2 was the first Horcrux, and Dumbledore has already destroyed another one. Dumbledore and Harry are lucky that Voldemort didn't just pick 7 random objects, and due to Voldemort's vanity and obsession with symbols, they can work out that he picked objects associated with Hogwarts founders, like his mother's Slytherin locket, a cup that belonged to Helga Hufflepuff, and something that belonged to Rowena Ravenclaw, as well as Voldemort's snake Nagini, which he can control with his mind. Harry has a confrontation with Draco after he finds him crying, because Draco is afraid of Voldemort, and Draco tries to use Crucio on Harry, while Harry badly hurts him in retaliation with a spell from the Half-Blood Prince's old notes. He gets detention from Snape and misses his next Quidditch match, but they win anyway with Ginny and Ron playing extra well, and Harry finally gets together with Ginny. Things are nice for the next few weeks, but then Harry learns 2 unsettling things. Draco has finally solved a puzzle he's been working on all semester in the Room of Requirement, but Harry doesn't know what. And 2, Professor Trelawney's prophecy from 15 years ago was overheard by Snape, who was a full-fledged Death Eater at the time, so it's his fault that Voldemort found out. Harry hashes this information out with Dumbledore, who insists that he trusts Snape for reasons unknown, and tells Harry he won't discuss this further. Dumbledore and Harry journey to destroy the Horcrux in a cave guarded by poisoned goblets and reanimated corpses. They get what they think is the Horcrux, but later turns out to be a fake, put there by someone who beat these trials before them. Someone named R.A.B. When they get back to Hogwarts, they find that Death Eaters have infiltrated the school through a magical cupboard Draco has been repairing all year. Dumbledore paralyzes Harry under his invisibility cloak, from which Harry witnesses Malfoy successfully disarm, but fail to kill Dumbledore, and Snape does it instead. Snape reveals to Harry that he is the Half-Blood Prince, a name he gave himself because his mother was Eileen Prince. At Dumbledore's funeral, Harry dumps Ginny, so she won't be a target for Voldemort, and he resolves not to come back to school for his final year because he has to make destroying the Horcruxes his top priority, and Hermione and Ron of course intend to accompany him. Book 7 lacks the structure of the other books because it's the only one that doesn't follow Harry's academic year, so at times it can feel more meandering, but it's a great conclusion to the series as a whole. This book is a real trial, not only from external forces in the form of the many servants of Voldemort, but also internal ones with Harry's faith in Dumbledore being shaken as unsavory elements of his young adult life are brought to light, such as Dumbledore's proto-Death Eater sympathies as a young man, and friendship with the man who would become his arch-nemesis, Gellert Grindelwald. This last book also dumps a lot of last-minute lore on us, which nearly works, though it creates a few continuity errors, such as the idea that wands have some kind of internal loyalty and can switch allegiances and not work properly if you disarm or defeat their user, which kind of breaks the books because people get disarmed and defeated constantly in these novels. As Book 7 begins, Harry's magical protection at the Dursleys is ending because he is coming of age, and the Dursleys themselves are going under very reluctant protection from a few members of the Order of the Phoenix named Daedalus Diggle and Hestia Jones. Dudley has a mini redemption arc and makes peace with Harry before he goes. Then the real escape begins, and Harry's friends arrive, drink Polyjuice Potion, and all pretend to be Harry so they can get him away from the non-wizardy world to somewhere more defensible. Unfortunately, it's an ambush, and Voldemort himself comes to finish Harry off, but Harry's wand does some weird shenanigans and prevents Voldemort's curses from working. This will start Voldemort on a quest for a more powerful wand that Harry will get updates on through his dreams. Harry's owl Hedwig is caught in the crossfire during the battle, Mad-Eye Moody is killed, and a Weasley twin loses an ear, but Harry gets safely to Tonks' parents' house, and from there to the Burrow, where Bill and Fleur are getting married. Bill's face got destroyed by a werewolf during the Death Eater invasion of Hogwarts during the last book, but Fleur still likes him. Ginny gives Harry a kiss, but Ron is mad at Harry because Harry is supposed to be staying away from her. Ron, however, seems to be actively pursuing a relationship with Hermione this year, thanks to a self-help book called 12 Fail-Safe Ways to Charm Witches. Dumbledore's will is read before the wedding, and the minister comes by to give Dumbledore's Deluminator to Ron, a copy of the Tale of Beetle the Bard to Hermione, and the Sword of Godric Gryffindor to Harry, along with the golden snitch caught from Harry's first Quidditch match, although Scrimgeour holds onto the sword because it didn't belong to Dumbledore. The gang try to figure out why Dumbledore gave them what seem like random gifts, but they have to continue the main quest to get that info, so they go to the wedding in the meantime. At the wedding reception, the trio get a message that the Ministry of Magic has fallen to Death Eaters, and all of Dumbledore's supporters have to go into hiding or start falling in line. This seems like as good a time as any for Harry, Ron, and Hermione to start their quest, so they teleport away and camp out at 12 Grimmauld Place, where Harry finds out that R.A.B. was Regulus Arcturus Black, another deceased relative of Sirius. Thanks to Creature, who helped Regulus, they find out that the real locket was stolen by Mundungus Fletcher, and in turn, they learn that Umbridge took the locket for herself. Lupin also stops by and tries to join their quest, but he recently married Tonks, so Harry tells Lupin to pack it and go home and take care of his wife. Harry and the gang go undercover at the Ministry of Magic by using Polyjuice Potion to disguise themselves as Ministry officials. At the Ministry, the Muggle-borns are being persecuted as magical thieves by pureblood courts, overseen, of course, by Dolores Umbridge. After getting entangled in the lives of the people they're pretending to be, Harry and his friends escape with the locket and try to teleport back to 12 Grimmauld Place, but they end up having to hide out in the forest instead because a Death Eater breaks the Fidelis charm. Luckily, the gang brought the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black with them, so he can pass them information about what's going on at Hogwarts. It's worth noting that these magical portraits are never really explained, and they are extremely weird. Are they like the magical equivalent of an AI clone of your dead family and friends? They don't seem to operate that way because they genuinely seem to be able to reason and think and recall information about their past lives. Do the paintings have souls distinct from the human person that they're painted of? Can they die if the painting is burned? They almost seem like a good guy equivalent of a Horcrux. And the fact that Dumbledore has a portrait that Harry can ask advice from at the end of the book kind of cuts the legs out from how sad his death is, although it's nice to have. Anyway, Phineas fills in the pieces on why Dumbledore wanted Harry to have the sword of Godric Gryffindor, which is that it's one of the only known ways to destroy a Horcrux. The Horcrux they retrieved from Umbridge they just have to carry around with them, which is terrible because it makes them slightly evil like the One Ring, to the point that when Ron is wearing it he gets so tired of their meandering quest that he ditches the gang and goes home. Now that the trio is a duo, Harry convinces Hermione to go to Godric's Hollow, where his parents are from, and he visits their grave, which he's never done. On their tombstone he finds 1 Corinthians 15:26, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Harry tries to visit a witch called Bathilda Bagshot and get answers about the stuff he's been hearing about Dumbledore, but Harry is being an idiot and it's a trap. They escape, but Harry's wand gets broken. Now with only one wand between them, things are not looking so good for our heroes as they hide out in the woods. But a silver doe Patronus appears, and Harry follows it while Hermione sleeps. It leads him to the sword of Godric Gryffindor to finally destroy the Horcrux locket. A penitent Ron pops up and explains that Dumbledore's Illuminator helped him find the gang again. Harry lets Ron destroy the Horcrux, but the Horcrux puts up a fight and gives Ron visions of Harry and Hermione making out and of his mother preferring Ginny to Ron because she finally has a daughter after so many sons. Harry assures Ron that the Hermione stuff is nonsense because he's still very much not into the bookworm, since he only dates fellow jocks. I might be editorializing a bit there. Things really are a lot nicer now that Ron is back, and it feels like a proper adventure again instead of a hopeless nightmare with literally the whole country trying to kill Harry. Next up, they learn about the Deathly Hallows, as referred to in the Book of Fairy Tales given to Hermione, and explained more fully by Luna's dad, Xenophilus Lovegood. The Deathly Hallows are 3 gifts given to 3 brothers by the embodiment of death: the Resurrection Stone, the Elder Wand, and Death's Mantle. Possessing all 3 makes a wizard the Master of Death, and Harry believes that the story refers to 3 real objects, one of which is his invisibility cloak, but Hermione thinks it's all nonsense. Next, the gang are captured and sent to Malfoy Manor, where they meet up with Luna Lovegood, a goblin called Griphook, and Ollivander, who Voldemort captured to get info on wands. Hermione is tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange, despite Ron's attempts to get Bellatrix to pick on him instead. But Dobby arrives and helps Harry one last time before Bellatrix stabs him. They all teleport to Bill and Fleur's home, where Harry swaps notes with Ollivander, who finally convinces Hermione that the Elder Wand is real. With the help of Griphook, Harry and friends sneak into Gringotts because Bellatrix Lestrange lets slip that Voldemort has put something in her vault, the Cup of Hufflepuff. They break in and get the cup, but Griphook alerts the guards and gets the sword of Gryffindor. They now have a new Horcrux, though no way to destroy it, but they still don't know what the final Horcrux is, the item having to do with Rowena Ravenclaw. Luckily, Voldemort narrows down the search by angrily and accidentally thinking so hard about where it is that Harry can pick it up with his Skardar. It's at Hogwarts. Sneaking into the castle, they find that Neville has become the leader of the Death Eater resistance at school, and with Harry back, he puts the wheels in motion to stage a revolution. With the help of Ravenclaw House, Harry finds out that the most important Ravenclaw relic is the Diadem of Rowena, which is in the Room of Requirement. Meanwhile, Ron thinks to go use the Basilisk Fang from the dead serpent in the basement from Book 2 to destroy the cup, and then suggests that they go tell the Hogwarts house elves to run since there's about to be a battle. Hermione makes out with him because he independently thought of helping the elves without her badgering him about the Society for the Promotion of Elvish Welfare. Voldemort, meanwhile, has gotten his hands on the Elder Wand because it turns out Dumbledore had it this whole time, having won it in a duel against Grindelwald. But because of what both Harry and Voldemort know about the allegiance of wands shifting based on who is the rightful master of the wand, Voldemort thinks that if he kills Snape, he will become the new master of the wand, since Snape killed Dumbledore. But it turns out Snape was double secretly working for Dumbledore this whole time because he was sweet on Harry's mom when they were in school, and he deeply regrets causing her death by relating information to Voldemort. Because Draco disarmed Dumbledore before Snape killed him, the disarming counted as a transfer of allegiances, and that made Draco the master of the Elder Wand, even though he never actually had it. But then Harry disarmed Draco at Malfoy Manor, making Harry the true master of the Elder Wand. Harry learns that Snape is a frenemy of the good guys instead of a straight-up villain, because Snape uses his dying breaths to give Harry his memories for use in a pensive, and from them, Harry also learns that Dumbledore intends for Harry to die, and that he hoped to raise Harry to be the kind of person who would willingly die for his friends. Dumbledore needs Harry to die because Voldemort accidentally turned Harry into a bonus Horcrux when he tried to kill him before the start of these books. So for Voldemort to be mortal again, Horcrux Harry has to die, which is a huge bummer. Harry tells Neville to make sure to kill Voldemort's snake, and then, without telling Hermione or Ron, Harry uses his invisibility cloak to visit Voldemort's camp and give himself up so Voldemort will kill him. We also find out where the last Deathly Hallow is, which is the Resurrection Stone, because Dumbledore hid it in the golden snitch he gifted Harry. It opens when Harry says to the snitch, "I am about to die," and it allows him to speak to his dead family, who encourage him as he faces the end of his life. Voldemort kills Harry, except not quite. Harry wakes up in a limbo area at King's Cross Station, and Dumbledore gives him one last lore dump to tie everything together. Harry returns to the world of the living, finally 100% himself with no connection to Voldemort, to give the Death Eaters a really rotten day because they finally thought Harry was dead. Neville successfully summons the sword of Godric Gryffindor and kills Nagini, making Voldemort finally mortal. Harry and Voldemort duel, and Harry, ever Dumbledore's man, starts giving Voldemort a giant lore dump on everything that happened and why Harry himself is the master of the Elder Wand. Voldemort tries to use the killing curse on Harry, and Harry disarms Voldemort, with the reverberation killing him. In the movie, they stupidly have Voldemort's body spontaneously combust or whatever, but that's not how it goes down here. Voldemort dies as just a random guy, and people can see his body and verify he's really dead this time. Harry consults with Dumbledore's portrait upstairs and decides to put the Elder Wand back in Dumbledore's tomb, so that its power will be broken if Harry dies a natural death. Although, if Harry ever gets disarmed for any reason, I guess that plan is out the window because the wand allegiances thing makes no sense. Then we get a time skip 19 years later where we see that everybody you would have expected to get married did, and they all had kids with names of main characters who died, and everybody lived happily ever after except the ones who died. Thanks for watching.